Hello everyone, welcome to Every Degree Matters. I'm your host Saffran Minhar. Today I got Chris with me. We got a guest for the very first time. We have a guest, and he is apparently we just having a conversation. He is from our own university, so it's welcome to Arman, and he studied at Sussex University, so he is probably a Sussex alumni. But let me give an idea. Give me who Arman is. So Arman is an electrical engineer, an electrical and electronic engineer who's been living in UK or the United Kingdom, they call it, for 5 years. During his time, he has had a lot of different engagements with culture, people, and also have a different view. He is from Iran. He's going to talk about his culture, what's happening in Iran, and how has the last few years navigated through changes that's happening in the country. And also, he has this different reflection of now living in a Western country, UK, and compared to what he was living in Iran. So, with that, Aman, thanks so much for joining us. Very first of all, like, it was so great when you said that you are from
Yeah.
Sussex, because that makes it more comfortable for me to talk. Because I was there, Chris was there, and you're there too. So we have some common ground and
Yeah,
maybe
I'm
some
happy.
common disagreements, perhaps. So, yeah. So, Chris, for you.
No, I
Oh,
just wanted
Aman,
to
do you want to
thank you
say
guys
anything?
for inviting me and having this meeting. And it's also an opportunity for myself as well to speak out loud and express my opinion and what I've experienced in these 5 years. Because, to be honest, it hasn't been also a normal 5 years. We have had lots of events and lots of things going on. So, yeah, I'm happy to be here. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's been very turbulent. But yeah, I also
Yeah.
want to
Thank you.
say it's great to have you
Yeah.
on, Arman. It's great to see you after some years from our time at Union of Sussex. And yeah, I can't think of a better
Oh,
person to
thank
have
you.
as our first guest for the podcast.
And you wanna write it down. Would it kill you just to listen? And you wanna sell it out with the words out of position.
So I wanted to ask a little bit maybe about some of the modern history of Iran. So obviously one of the most historic nations on earth. You
Yeah.
know, its history extends back thousands of years, one of the greatest civilizations in Persia, of course. And also from the 1900s, Iran has had a very profound impact on the Middle East and global politics. And I think a lot of people, they have a basic understanding of this history. So we were hoping from someone who's more familiar, you can break this down in more detail, starting perhaps with the rise of the Pahlavi dynasty, maybe to the present day. Like, what are some of the key events? Who are some of the key players? And how has this shaped the current situation in
Yeah,
Iran and in the
so
Middle East?
before the Pahlavis, for a quite long time, more than about 200 years, the Qajar dynasty was ruling the country. And the Qajars were a period of extreme corruption in the country. And it basically, um, apart from the very first king, who was Muhammad Khan Qajar, Agha Muhammad Khan Qajar, um, Agha Muhammad Khan Qajar was a person who I don't know the correct English name for it, but a person who gets neutered, so he can't he loses his fertility basically. Yeah, yeah. So
Eunuch, I think.
when he was young, he was such a rebellious teen, and the current king of that time, Karim Khan Zand, he wanted to te- eliminate him, but since he was a quite nicer king compared to the other ones, and people really loved him, and his name was Vakilur Roaya. It means the lawyer of the people. So this nice king decided to do that thing to him instead of eliminating him and executing him, because he always tried to form rebels against the against Karim Khan, and Karim Khan was um, one dynasty which only lasted for a few years, only for during the time that Karim Khan Azan himself was the king. And later on, when Lutf Ali Khan, his son, came, there was a period of chaos in the country. And it was in that time that Agha Muhammad Khan escaped, and he formed his rebels, and then he started taking power and basically gradually conquering the country. And not only the main course of Iran, but also neighboring countries. So, but Agha Muhammad Khan was such a brutal person. He had a feeling of revenge. So, for example, when Lutf Ali Khan was stuck in Shiraz, the people of Shiraz, um, yeah, I think, yeah, for a second your video went, but now it's back. So the people of Shiraz gave Agha Muhammad Khan asylum, and no, sorry, Lutf Ali Khan, not Agha Muhammad Khan. And Agha Muhammad Khan was so keen on capturing Lutf Ali Khan, and after basically mm, after the army arrived in Shiraz, Lutf Ali Khan escaped to Kerman, and when he arrived in Kerman, he blinded the whole city for just giving asylum to Lutf Ali Khan. But anyway, they say that Agha Muhammad Khan was so capable that he traveled from the southeast board near the southeast region of Iran. He traveled from there to the Caucasus only in 2 days, which is like literally 1,500 kilometers, about more than way above 1,000 kilometers. And he conquered Caucasus in
Right.
only like 2 or 3 days. So the only authoritative king of the Qajar dynasty was basically Agha Muhammad Khan. And later on, because he didn't have any son, because he wasn't fertile, his cousin Fath Ali Shah rose to power. And from that moment on, till the end of the Qajars, most of the kings were extremely corrupt, extremely incapable, and they were famous for selling out the country to foreign powers. Because the end of the Zandia dynasty, which was Karim Khan and his son Lutf Ali Khan, that was during the time that the European nations were rising to power. So basically, the East was no longer the superpower of the world. Like, neither were the Iranians, and to some extent, the Ottoman Empire was rising to power, but it was still not in the peak of it, because the peak of the Ottoman Empire was during the 15th century, about the time that Safavids were also in power in Iran. So,
Right. Right.
for example, Nasruddin Shah in the Qajar dynasty ruled for more than 50 years, and he was such a he was so busy with having fun and leisure, so the people were starving in the country, but he went to trips to Europe just to like have a for example, they say like he went to Europe for only a shaving his one of his pets. That's how ridiculous it was. Yeah. And
Sounds
about
ridiculous.
that
Yeah.
time, the Russians were arriving from the north, and the British were arriving from the eastern borders, from their colony of India. And I don't know if you have my voice, but I yeah. So in these moments, do you still have
Yeah.
my
We
voice? But
can
do
hear
you
you.
also have my picture as well? Because okay. So
Yes.
it was during this time that there was lots of opposition, and because of the incapability and the unstable situation of the country, um, people um, had there was lots of growing opposition and tension. So there was this movement of constitution, and Iran became the first country out of Europe to have a constitution revolution. And this was not permitted under Nasruddin Shah. However, when it came to Muzaffar Shah, Muzaffar was a soft person compared to the other kings, and he accepted the constitution, which led to the saying of Adl Muzaffar, which means the peace of Muzaffar, because Muzaffar ad-Din Shah accepted the constitution. But sadly, Muzaffar ad-Din Shah passed away a year later, and his son Muhammad Ali Shah was another yet um, Russian puppet. So um, the Tsar Russian army had lots of influence in the in the army of Iran, whilst the British had more influence in the
Right.
parliament, which was newly established.
Right. So just so I understand so far, so before the
Yeah,
Pahlavi
that's right.
dynasty, right, there was the Qajar dynasty, and they had the rebellious young man who became the king. It was the only effective, or strong ruler of the dynasty, and then since
Yeah,
then they kind of
yeah,
descended
basically.
into corruption. And then at the same time, the Russians and
Yeah,
the British started moving into Iran and influencing the country. You said the
had
British
in
in the
the army.
parliament, the Russians
Yeah,
were in the army. Okay, so like these two foreign powers are then
yeah,
vying for influence in Iran. Um, and then at
yeah,
some point you said
basically.
there was a
So
constitutional revolution.
the thing is that the British, the Russians were so keen on conquering the country and forming colonies like they did to the Caucasus and Central Asia. However, the British were keen on colonizing it, and they formed like the Southern Rifles, the Southern Persian Rifles in the south of the country, but it wasn't successful, and it ended up with a war with some local rebels against the southern the British Southern Rifles. So, and in the north, there were the Cossacks. I don't know if you know about the Cossacks, but the Cossacks were the paramilitary force of the Russian
Yeah,
Empire, and they were amazing in conquering lands. And they also date back to the early Russian history and how Russia was basically formed. So the Cossacks were basically initially they were a ethnic group, a Slavic ethnic group in Ukraine, but later on, it turned into a culture and a military force, and they started hiring local people wherever they went and paying the people to fight for the Russian army. But there was a strict rule that the leader and the commanders were supposed to be always Russian. The soldiers didn't matter, but the commanders should have been always Russian. So um, Muhammad Ali Shah Qajar, sorry, Muhammad Ali Shah Qajar came after Muzaffar died, and Muhammad Ali Shah was heavily under influence of the Russians. So they pushed him to shelling the newly established parliament, which also has the famous saying in Iran saying that Majlis be tu bestan. They have shelled the parliament. For example, when they say what has happened, why there's something serious going on. Like for example, when there's protest, when there's something, when there's chaos coming in, people say Majlis be tu bestan. They've shelled the parliament again. So it's a famous saying, yeah. And
yeah. I'll have to incorporate that
yeah,
into my
yeah,
repertoire
you're
of
welcome.
phrases and sayings.
So Muhammad Ali Shah closed down the parliament for a period until Ahmad Shah Qajar came after. Actually, no, Muhammad Shah Qajar came after Muhammad Ali Shah, and then Ahmad Shah came, and the following kings were not so better than the previous ones, and they signed many terrible treaties with both the Russians and the British. The famous ones being the Golestan Treaty, the Turkmenchai Treaty with the Russians, and the um, what you call it, the Goldsmith Treaty with the British. So the British seized lands in western Pakistan and Afghanistan from Iran, and western Afghanistan, like the provinces of Pashtunistan,
Yeah,
and also the Russians annexed way more land than what the British did. They annexed Azerbaijan, Armenia, Dagestan, Turkmenistan, and parts of Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. So all these lands were part of Iran until
Right.
19th century, basically.
Um, yeah, and even to this day, there's still Azeri
Yeah,
people in the
there's more
northwest of
Azeri
Iran, no?
people in Iran than there is in the Republic of Azerbaijan. Yeah, there is more Azerbaijanis in
Oh,
Iran, and
interesting.
Azerbaijanis, despite not speaking Persian, they're part of our history, and they date back to um, way before the Turks arrived. They had an old Azeri language, which was not a Turkic language. It was somehow similar to
Yeah.
Tatish language, which is the almost extinct language of northern Iran. It was basically the language of people who didn't speak Persian, but they were still part of the Iranian people. And you still can find that language in southern
Right.
Russia, in like Dagestan, where there's a small minority speaking Tatish. But anyway, talking about the Azeris, it was during Muhammad Ali Shah that there was this two Azeri generals. They weren't generals, but they were ex-army commanders, Sattar Khan and Bagher Khan. They were one of the two famous figures, and they decided to stand against Muhammad Ali Shah, which was acting for the Russians. And the Azeris seriously didn't like the Russians. They basically hated the Russians with all of their body cells, way more than the other ethnic groups in Iran, because they were the first to counter the Russians. Because the Russians, they were basically the first to be um, invaded in case of a Russian invasion, because being in the northwest of Iran. So Sattar Khan and Bagher Khan, in that time, Azerbaijan and Dagestan were still part of Iran by that time. Um, so they formed the army and they marched to Tehran and they conquered Tehran, which is a very important happening, and it made the constitution to be
Right.
reestablished. And Muhammad Ali Shah went to basically he fled the country, and I'm not sure if he was executed or he fled the country, but either happened to him. He didn't last for long in the Rhine. So later on, uh, by the beginning of the 20th century, a lot of these treaties were signed and many lands were seized by both the Russians and the British. And this was growing, and this caused growing sense of nationalism in the Iranians to say like, why are we losing our lands? Why is this happening? Like you just selling out our lands for your own benefits, and it's not even benefits for the people. It was only the elites that had that like they went to holidays. There's this saying that one of the Qajar kings signed the treaty just for him to be able to have holidays in Europe. But anyway,
Did they do the
no,
treaty
the
signing in
treaties were
Europe?
signed mostly in Iran by them. Yeah, and there was this after the Turkmenistan and Golistan Treaty, which annexed the Caucasus land. They signed the 1919 treaty with the British, which was not really related to land control. It was related to basically colonial things about the British. Basically, they gave all permission to selling out of the tobacco production of Iran to the British, as well as yeah,
Interesting. I didn't know they had tobacco
as well
production.
as the oil production. And the British were about to form the
Mm.
Anglo-Persian Oil Company, which is now currently the British Petroleum. So that yeah, the origins of BP.
It's the
But
origins of
we'll come
BP.
to that
Interesting.
later, talking about Mossadegh. So this 1919 treaty of the control of tobacco made the prices spike, and it was that time that um, it was in that time that the mullahs and the religious scholars gained popularity. What they did is that they were a big. The mullahs and the religious scholars were somewhat into business as well at this time. So they owned some productions and they were rich people. You know, they were like not elites, but they were businessmen. So they didn't like the British
Sure.
having grip in the economy. So they gave a fatwa. What is a fatwa? Fatwa in religion in Islam is when scholars claim something um, for the population. For example, it says they basically said that tobacco is haram from now on, and that it basically meant that tobacco use on whenever it's under another because the British are controlling the tobacco production, it's haram. People shouldn't
Right. So not because
exactly
of the
yeah
substance, but
exactly.
because it was controlled by
So
the British.
the people
Okay.
said, okay, it's haram. We're not going to use it. We're not going to buy anything which profits the British. And it actually worked because um, the British started having lots of losses, and they reversed the treaty. So it was that time that the religious scholars gained power and gained popularity between the people. They weren't still powerful. Yeah,
So it was
more or
tied
less.
to nationalism.
Nationalism and just um, being being some sort of like a front against the terrible regime, you know. But in that time,
Right.
when Ahmad Shah Qajar came, Reza Shah was only a prime minister. What he was before, about the time. Let me say when it was. It was probably around 1914 that Reza Shah came to power. So I know that it was a 1299 coup, but I'm not sure what year it was in the in your calendar. I can just search it. Yeah, 1921 coup. It was the 1921 coup that Reza Shah rose to power, and before that, he was he was a
Hmm.
prime minister, and before him being a prime minister, he was the commander of the Cossack army in Iran, and yeah, Reza Shah was
He wasn't a
he
noble,
was
right? He
no, he
was
wasn't
like a
a
commoner.
noble. He in fact he was from a poor family when he was a kid. He was from Mazandaran, north of
Mm.
Iran, um, which is like the province north of Iran, and he was a commander for the Cossack army. But later on, when he uh, turned into a prime minister, and when he became the um, he basically coronated, it was his coronation, and in that time, Ahmad Shah was um, was being lied to, and they said, Ahmad Shah, we're going to take you out of the country because of the unstable situation of Iran. And when they took him to France, I think they told him, yeah, from now on, Reza Shah is going to be in power, and you're going to be out of power. So that's how the Qajar dynasty ended. That's how humiliating it was for them. And Reza Shah launched a coup against Ahmad Shah Rhine in 1921, and he finally declared himself the king of Iran, and it was the start of the Pahlavi dynasty. Al- Although the Pahlavis
Okay.
had a authoritative start, Reza Shah did many good things for Iran. He first of all um, um, what you call it um, he closed down the Cossack army. Although he was a commander of the Cossacks initially.
Right. So Did that
Yes, it did.
effectively end a lot of the
The
Russian influence in
Reza
Iran?
Shah was more in favor for the Western powers compared to the Russian Empire. Yeah. So
Right.
he had lots of um, good stuff that and he had good deeds for the country. Yeah, like reforms. For
Like
example,
reforms or just
not necessarily reforms. He
reforms?
was still a dictator, but many people call him the good dictator. Yeah, he was
Okay.
still
Right.
still had a problem with the parliament, and he didn't let the parliament to work freely. And another fact, he also heavily oppressed the religious scholars, which recently gained popularity. So yeah, he basically oppressed all oppositions to
Got it.
himself. However, himself,
Right. And then where does the um
yeah, it
what was
was
it,
initially
Anglo-Iranian oil
Anglo-Persian,
company? What
but
was it, the name?
the name of when the name of the country changed to Iran
Anglo-Persian.
by Reza Shah himself, everyone just started calling him an Anglo-Iranian company. And Reza Shah had lots
Mm.
of reforms for the country. For example, the establishment of modern schools, the establishment of the railways, the establishment of the roadways, and basically it built the infrastructure of Iran. And it was in that time that Iran started having, not to the European extent, but still having industrial revolution. And many people started living in the urban areas, and urbanization started taking shape. And um, yeah, so yeah,
Yeah, so
basically
it's basically
they call him
modernizing
like
in a sense.
the father of modern Iran was basically Reza Shah. Something similar to Mustafa Kemal Ataturk in Turkey. Yeah. Yeah. But the
Right.
difference was
Good
that
comparison,
Mustafa
yeah.
Kemal was somewhat more he was more modern, and he was more looked into democracy, all because he declared himself the president, and they established a republic. But Reza Shah, in my opinion, he made a mistake over there, because when he met with Ataturk told him, you should also establish a republic. So after people can continue what you've done. But fearing the more ethnically diverse country Reza Shah had compared to Turkey, um, he didn't do that. And it came up to about the World War II that things started getting out of hand again. Now, a lot of people say that Reza Shah was a friend of Hitler, but that's not basically true. Although many Germans, technicians, and many German scholars were in the country in Iran at the moment, and they were basically helping to modernize the country. For example, the railways, if the railways of South Asia was built by British, the railways of Iran was built by the Germans. Or like when you have the Eastern Europe built by the
Right.
Russians, you still have like Iran and I think Iraq as well, built by the Germans. Anyway, um, the Germans, but they didn't have that much of a close relation. But Reza Shah was still fearing the Russian, the now Soviet Union and the British from the east. So Hitler looked more to Reza Shah than Reza Shah looked to Hitler, basically, because Hitler saw Iran as a perfect ally in the Middle East. And for example, there's a letter from Hitler saying that stating that um, he's keen to arriving on the Iranian borders during the World War II period, because they came up as far as Stalingrad, so they weren't that far from us anymore. But so the Allies launched a campaign called the Persian Campaign, and in that time they invaded Iran, stating close workings with the Nazi regime. So the British invaded from the east again, and the Russians marched from the north. This time they invaded for real. They weren't just fighting on the front lines. City,
Right.
just Aman, I have some. Just it'll be really nice if you can go the timeline, which year it was, because when you're talking, like people wouldn't know. Because I
yeah, yeah,
know what
yeah.
you're
Okay,
saying.
I'll
I
try.
know the years and everything, but people who are listening to us would just don't want to be uh left in the, and just for them to have an idea. And also, like what I wanted to ask you is that where was the religious beliefs within the people in Iran,
Yeah.
or in, they call it Persia. So because I meet a lot of Iranians here, they don't say I'm from Iran, they say I'm from Persia. So because they don't even call the Iran as the name, some people, because they didn't even like it. But my question is that how was people, whether I do know they are predominantly Muslims, but were they the Shias or the were the Shias or the Sunnis, or how was that navigating through? Because I know the mullahs were highly religious, but even before mullah, means Reza Shah, whoever you name it,
Yeah.
they were all Muslims, right? But they were divided in particularly how would they categorize
Well,
themselves.
let me put it this way. Um, whether Iranians like it or not, we're Muslim because it doesn't mean that there's a unified Muslim identity in the world. That's what Islamists want to push, to say that all Muslims are one nation, which is not true because you have many different Christian nations. Not all Christians are from the same nation. You have African Christians, you have
Right.
South American Christians, you have European Christians, even have Asian Christians. So I think, in my opinion, it's the same about the Muslim identity because up until early 20th century, um, especially in places where multiple religions existed, people didn't identify by nation, rather they identified mostly by religion, and in places which people shared the same religion but had different languages, people identified by their language and not by their religion. So that's that's where the twist is. Iranians always identified first as Iranian and then as Muslims because they were not the same as their neighbors. For example, from the south, people spoke Arabic. From the north and the west, people were Turkish. Um, and in the east, people spoke like South Asian languages, like the Hindi, basically. So Iranians were probably like left alone over there. So they, despite being most of the nation around us being Muslim, they still didn't saw themselves as the same, because especially because of the ill-fated relations they had with the Ottomans and with the Arabs in the early years. And realistically, yeah, I agree. The Arabs invaded us years ago, about 1,000 years ago, and they weren't really nice when they conquered us. But
Was this
um,
the
the Abbasid
Abbasid
was
Caliphate?
better than the Umayyads, but the Umayyads was the horrible one, which was during the early years. Yeah, the
Okay,
Umayyads.
Umayyad, right? What and what,
I'm not
about
sh-
what years was the
I'm not
Umayyad
sure how many years
the
they
caliphate, or
ruled,
how would
but
you
I'm not
describe
sure,
it?
but I can check it. I just know that they didn't last it for more than a century. They were a pretty short one. Umayyad Khalifa. It ruled it ruled from
And
So
also,
1661 to
sorry, go ahead,
750.
Saffran.
I think you understood my question wrong. I wanted to ask is that what I was trying to ask is that how are the people, like, are they religious? So there's two different contexts, right? Like, you can be a Muslim, but were they going to mosque? Were they fasting? Were they, following the basic principles of Islam? Or they were like, just for the name, they were Muslims because they were born in a Muslim country. I wanted to know that context, because that's what, if you go in 1958, and when the revolution happened, it was the biggest, it played a big role to convince people and the mullahs when they came in. So how, at, when you talk about the 1921, when Raza Shah came into power, and then when he started building stuff, like, how was um the context? Like, how were the people, like, were really following the aspects of religion, hardcore extremists, or they were like basic, doing all the uh, basic
Yeah.
stuff like praying and, five times, so, and then, doing all those basic things and not getting into
To be honest,
extremist ideology.
they were always Muslim, but and even if they were religious, they still never were extremist, because Islam wasn't really extremist up until the 20th century, where there was growing. It was the point that Muslims started feeling that since since they're oppressed, they should have the extremist ideologies. Same with every other ideology. It always develops under oppression.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, no. I get that part. I mean, yes, I mean, there was, Islam was never an extremist religion, or either Judaism. Not, every aspects of life they had. If you look at it, there in every
Yeah,
religion, there are good people, nice
exactly. Yeah,
people, and there are also goons and idiots who always take into extremist ideology. So in your knowledge and idea, you're saying that people were basic Muslims. They were doing five
yeah,
times fasting, coping up with all the principles, and then that's the reason they were able to even take a little bit further and even ban the
yeah.
use of tobacco and making it haram. But technically, it's not haram, because the way tobacco, how the Quran explains, is that any element that you take to your body, if it is harmful for you, could be considered haram. So it's, if something that kills you every day, so even if you take something,
Yeah,
a poison, it could also be haram. So, like,
So the
but
air
there are also
in
yeah,
Bangkok is haram then.
yeah, yeah, no, it's something that kills you, could also so that's why it's like very contradiction. And never believed in fatwas are the crazy things that people made up shit. And they get together, and they know, and those
yeah.
goons don't even have any idea what they're saying, but just 10 people get together and say, okay, this is what it is. But anyway, so the reason why am I going to drive this towards that is that, like, Raza Shah, and then when how Raza Shah ruled the country, right? When he was a prime minister, and then he became the president, the king, and he self-coordinated himself. And during that period of time, like, if the country was not religious, or the country was okay, everybody was practicing everything. And when you transition, I want to
Yeah.
transition from there to modern Iran, and where are we now? Because I wanted to, like, talk the recent events, and that perspective of how was, when the mullahs, grew up, and there were a lot of people having control, that made it easy for Khomeini to get in and start the revolution. That was the tool that, I mean, was one of the tools that he used. Of course, he was in France, 104 days, yada yada yada, and then and also how. So in your understanding, or like,
Yeah, more or
they were
less.
just regular Muslims. They were not extremists, right? So which part of the period of time did they ever become extreme, or it was just that it was portrayed in that way during the late night? I'm talking about specifically in 1950, and then 51, 52, 53, leading up to the
Um,
revolution.
so um, since World War II happened, and when Reza
Uh huh.
Shah was exiled by the Allied forces, um, in that time, the scholars and the religious scholars didn't have that much of popularity. They still had popularity because of the tobacco movement. Because especially it was the tobacco movement that gave the religious scholars hope in the people, because it was the first time that they did something for the people and the people gained hope for them. But still, they were still minority. They didn't have that much of um, uh, support. But realistically, when Reza Shah got exiled, his son Mohammad Reza Shah came into power, and he was pretty soft for the first 25 years. But the mistake that they did, both of them, it was that they oppressed the religious scholars, and they brought, especially Mohammad Reza Shah, they brought lots of westernization elements to the country, and I wasn't like I'm personally not against that, because some elements of the Western culture is good, but you can't just push it into people by force, because people need to adopt to it. So lots of these religious scholars,
Yeah.
because for example, there's a event that Reza Shah goes to the Gohar Shah mosque, and they start firing at all the mullahs over there, which were protesting, because there was the scholars were over there and protesting, and Reza Shah takes a brigade over there, and they shoot them all. So these events were pretty big mistakes, and the more you oppress a movement, the more it gains power, you know.
Well, I think that's interesting because you mentioned, right, like about
Exactly, yeah.
extremism arising from suppression.
Yeah,
And
so
that goes
that's what
back
the
to your
problem
point.
is, and they didn't. They were oppressing the religious fronts. However, the religious front took back revenge from gaining the support of the people. So the people were more or less like okay with Reza Shah, and as well as Mama Reza Shah, because the people saw religion as a personal thing, not as the whole personality of someone. You know, so like the religion only belongs to personal use, and only belongs to Friday prayer 3 times a day. Some people don't even do that. Some people drink alcohol but also believe in God. That was how religion was, and for the most part, even up to this day, even during the revolution, it was like that. It was just that people started believing in a regime change in during the revolution, and you say like you think that the religious extremists of the Islamic Republic suddenly rose to power, and like 90% of Iranians suddenly started supporting them, and 90% of Iranians suddenly started having extremist beliefs, but it was never the case. First of all, the revolution wasn't carried solely by the Islamists. It was carried by multiple factions. There was a national front. There was the Islamic Republic front. There was the more hardcore Islamists. There were the leftists, which I think the leftists were the majority of the. They carried the majority of the revolution, because the leftists were the armed forces in the were the majority of the armed rebellions against the monarchy during the revolution. It wasn't actually the religious front, but the problem was that the so basically the nationalists and the liberals were basically they supported westernization, whilst the leftists supported communism and different factions of communism. Some were Maoist, like looking to China. Some were looking to Soviet Union, and like the Hezb Tudeh, it means the people's movement. This was formed way back in after World War II, and
Right. So there's many different factions. I'm understanding like quite a bit more than I had originally understood. So how was it then that the
yeah,
religious faction came
I'm about to
into the
say that.
power?
So it's gonna get interesting now. So the Hezb Tudeh was since the 40s was gaining power, and it was directly or indirectly being paid and supported by being funded by Soviet Union. Hezb Baron was funded by the Chinese communists, and You had the Islamists growing as well, but they were still not the majority. And within and then not all Islamists were extremist Islamists. Some of them, like Shariati, who was a basically he was a um, philosopher, but he was a Muslim philosopher, and they believed in liberal Islam, like in democratic Islam. And then you had the nationalists with Mossadegh, which they were still, they basically the nationalists were more allied with the Islamists compared to the leftists. Do you understand? So they had more things in common
Yeah.
with the Islamists than what they had with the leftists. So all these movements were just raising to power, and like the ones having the ones having the most power was Hizb ut-Tahrir when it came to the revolution, and they especially had popularity in the western and northern regions, whilst the monarchists had support in southeast Iran. In Balochistan, they had a lot of support, and they also had a lot of support in the north northeastern parts, as well as parts of the ethnic minorities, apart from the western ethnic minorities, because like the Kurdish people and the Azeris really looked looked into the communists, and the Azeri population was somewhat divided as well. Some were looked into the Islamists, some looked into the communists, and yeah, the whole country was also divided, like between 30% monarchists, 30% in favor of the king, 30% against the king, and another 30% being like 60% being against the king, and within that 60%, some of them were Islamists, some of them were um, basically communist, and it also varied in different parts of the country. But overall, um, what happened was that the king feared revolution about like a year before the revolution, which actually happened, because um, people started believing like we can change the regime, because um, at one point the king said to the people like, I've heard your voice, I've heard your voice, and I have heard your voice for the reforms, and he started having some reforms under the name
Right.
he's claimed as the
Sorry, what were some
um,
of the reforms? And maybe like three of the big
it
ones.
was called the White Revolution, but I can say what they were. Just one second.
Was the oil company, was that still around at the time, or
No,
it wasn't
the oil
nationalized,
company
right?
was nationalized 1953.
No, he was
1953 it was
trying to
nationalized.
the yes, he was trying to nationalize it. That's the beginning of the problem because he wanted to, according to my understanding and knowledge, like Reza Shah wanted to say, okay, he said Americans were heavily involved, American oil companies, not America per se, and they wanted to. He said, let's refine oil in Iran rather than taking it to the U.S. or neighboring refineries. So that's where the clashes started. They became divided. They had different opinions, and the reason they took him out was like I saw the interview with Mohsen Zagara, the guy who Mohsen, I'm pronouncing it wrongly. His name is Mohsen Zagara. He's the
Mohsen
co-founder of
Rezai.
IRGC. So with whom, yeah, Mohsen Razai. So he was talking how at an interview. There's another podcast I always listen to, and he talks about. And they ask him, was during the real revolution or the 106 days or whatever the day, 107 days or 10 days when they were in Paris and they heavily involved. they were the guy who was interviewing them asked the question, was the CIA, MI6, or and the French intelligence was involved. He didn't answer that question, or neither he didn't say yes or no. So he just left it like that. And that was like, okay, so that's where I was like, okay, this is the guy who started IRGC with Khomeini in France, and he was there for a lot of days. So that's the beginning. So, like Aman said, I believe from the 1953, when he wants to nationalize it, that's where the American interest failed, because they wanted to say, oh, okay, hold on a second. Now you're trying to go more independent. And, look what we
Yeah.
did for Syria. Look what we did for Lebanon. Oh, sorry, not Syria, Libya, uh, this was all BS that we went around and messed up all these countries for nothing, or particularly oil. If we go, if that was the fundamental cause. So I think in during that period of time, I believe that Iran was, like Aman said, like I feel like I think the religion was not didn't play a big role. I think they made it that way so that it was easy to control the people. Fear is the most easy way to control people. I have always seen that. And they had to infest the fear and say, oh, this is what is going to happen. And in Islam, it's very easy to
Yeah.
make people make feel fear, because you tell some shit and then they'll be like, yeah, oh my God, it's going to happen. And I mean, I'm pretty sure it's there in Catholicism and in any other religions too. But it's just that they were able to manipulate that, and then everything fall into the this is what people always forget. During the period of Reza Shah, the son, the Middle East was very quiet. Like there wasn't like any
No, it was.
crazy bonkers things happening. So they looked at it and they say, "Oh, there's a peaceful Middle East. You can't have a peaceful world, right? They always want chaos. You know, as the Western country. I mean, America always wanted it. So that's the beginning of, I feel
Yeah.
like you got to watch that interview. It was really fascinating how he goes through all this segment of how Khomeini changed from being a
Yeah.
good guy to the god. So like he was like a moderate, and then later on, step by step, he started to doing crazy things, and he saw himself as god. That's where Hussein, he left 10 years after he was in power. But then again, he was like, he slowly left because he was out of control. And I think extremists, then it's just, they always pour in, something,
Exactly. Yeah.
just pour gasoline, whatever it's burning. It's very easy. It was very easy to do. So I think it's good to get an understanding from Aman, is that so religion was always there with everyone. You say it was personal, people didn't contradict it, and then later on they used as a tool to manipulate the people for a bad reason. And at the same time, it's look at, there's nothing wrong in it. Like I think, I also feel like during the period of Raza Shah, they might also have gone a little bit extremist on Western side.
Yes.
There's always have to be the checks and balances, right? You can't go to Rome or the
Yeah.
Vatican
Just.
and be naked, or be on a swimsuit. Like that's part of the deal. Like, so you have to respect culture. You have to respect synagogue. Like you can't go to Jerusalem, or like you can't go to
Yeah.
Israel and without wearing a kippah. You can't go to all those places, right? So I mean, those are the disrespectful things. So look at now the modern Middle East, or they call it East Asia, like how all those countries have modernized the religion. And it's really interesting. Like people are respecting. You go Saudi Arabia. There's so much events happening right now. You look at Qatar. You look at
Yeah.
Dubai. Everything is available. People are modernizing it, and I feel like that if he would have taken that initiative, I think it would have been a successful country,
If
and
I
not
can just jump
getting.
in quickly, so as I understand, though, Iran is a lot more
Yeah.
modern than people
Yeah. It
think
is
think
true.
it is.
Like
No, no, Arman, or
people are not that religious, or people don't think of putting the elements of religion in their daily life, and everyone is just basically personally religious. It's only for their personal use, ev- even if they are religious, because many people are not even religious nowadays, because of and a part of that comes from the reason of the atrocities of this Islamic Republic, which has led to people leaving religion because they see like, yeah, if this is the religion, and if this is the religious government, and if this is how it's supposed to work, then I'm not going to be one of them. And this led to many of the same persons and same people who participate in the revolution. Their children are no longer religious anymore.
Yeah, I can say that I have met a lot of people from Iran that have moved here in the last 15 years.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
they
exactly.
hate Islam. Like, I'm like, what's wrong with you? Like, I'm not saying it's wrong. The way they just, those people, like, I met a one guy couple of months back, and he was so religious until he was 15, and he just completely now hates the religion. And it's really a sad thing, right? Because why would someone, that's so
Yeah,
dishonesty you are doing for your own religion, right? Not talking about that particular individual, but for the country, like the what do you call, the Khomeinis, the ruling right now. So it's so dishonest, like you're in the name of you doing extremist, spreading extremist ideology, you're driving people away
yeah,
from your own religion. Particularly, you're not driving people into your religion. That's a pretty failed uh, plan, or failed structure of engagement and how they evolved. Because Humayni, when he was in the beginning, he, according to my knowledge, he was
yeah.
very modern and like he was an extremist, but later on people also, and the mullahs was also helping him, so they all encouraged him, and then it went into
Yeah.
this godly figure. He rose up, and people start to worship him, and it's just, and I don't
No,
think Iran
it's
is a
not a
Muslim country
majorly
anymore.
Muslim.
Some of the things that they do is some of the things that they do are pretty against the religion. So there is no way that anyone could look at them and say, I mean, who am I to judge? But it's just how I see things. And fun fact, if you guys don't know, that the food
Yeah,
biryani originated
we
from
also
Iran.
have a
People
similar
don't know
food,
that.
but
The
ours is, we
name,
call it chicken biryani, which is like more biryani, which is basically roast chicken, basically.
yes, and my and my name also comes from Iran.
Saffron, yeah, yeah.
So they always use
It's
saffron.
interesting, yeah.
That's the spice. Yeah, that's so popular. Whenever I meet people, they'll be like, "Oh, you're so expensive," and I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, well, I have a lot of Persian friends. Like, they don't. I mean, they say they're from Iran,
Yeah, I
but
get
they're
it.
like, they are more
Well, the
Persian.
thing is,
That's what they would.
yeah, the thing is that the
They
Persian
don't want to.
Empire, the Achaemenid Empire, really had some glory, but Persians are not the only Iranians in Iran, so it's not fair to say I'm Persian even if you're Persian. You know what I mean? It's like,
Wha- yeah, but I mean, some people prefer to say them they are from Persia. I mean, the Persians, particularly when meet
yeah,
like boomers, like when I meet older people. So then they always try to be consistent of what they say. But nevertheless, what I see right now is that I love the culture. I love Iran. I got one opportunity to go. I didn't go
yeah,
for Tehran in like 7 8 years ago, because I knew the ambassador to Iran from Sri Lanka, so they had an opportunity to go. I said no, no. But where I see myself is that where I see the country right now is that it has been torn into pieces, and it's a great country. I feel like what there could be a good pathway. And I think the bigger problem what I see is that they have to figure out a way for oil. Oil is the biggest and the dangerous
well,
element.
thankfully, I'd say thankfully oil is running out in
Commodity.
40 years, so there might be no more worries in the future.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, you never know.
Yeah,
AI
yeah.
could be something people will be fighting. But Aman, how do you see? How do you see? What? Where do you see? Like, how long you
Um,
lived in
yeah, just one
in
moment. I'm
Iran?
moving my.
What
Um,
city are you in right now, by the way?
I'm in Haringey is in.
Where is
Yeah, Haringey
Haringey?
is in North London.
South of London?
Haringey it's like a borough in North London,
North
and
London.
I live in Hornsey area of this Haringey.
Nice, nice. You're stepping up. You
Yeah,
graduated from Brighton.
I lived in Eastbourne for like 2 years, and during that time it was kind of peaceful over there, but it started being boring, and I decided to leave after I graduated. Yeah. So
Right.
yeah,
So, anyways, let me ask you the same. Let me ask you the question. So, how do you see um, right now? How many years you have lived in Iran, and what do you, how do you see the opportunity to? Where do you see the future? Because the IRGC is so much embedded in the society, in the system, right? Do you see someone within them rising up and becoming and saying, okay, like for example, there was difference between Raza Shah and his father. Will that be some difference, like when the Khomeini is gone and there's this other guy who is there, and if he is gone, like, is there anything that there could be some sort of change and how people see Iran in a different way? Because it's a beautiful country and it's so much rich in culture and so many educated people. They're so educated. Like, Iranians are like, I had back in the days, my uncles, they were living in Iran. They were working from
yeah.
Sri Lanka. They would go there to work, or in Iraq. So it was a beautiful country, and I think the Western influence also overtook the religious aspect of that country. And, well, there was external forces as well when you have
Yeah.
a lot of oil underneath your land. So so how do you see, Amal, like, as someone, you lived in Iran and then you moved to UK, it's a Western country, like, how do you see, where do you see the
Um,
future? What's the future you want for your country? Like, where do you see the starting point would be? I don't want, see, the thing is that the crazy, the so bad thing is that, which I don't adhere to it, is that they always bring this ideology of religion extremist.
yeah.
Every religion has extremist people, right? So just because this one country is, like, using the tool of, you can't categorize everyone as extremist, right? So, but at the same time, you do have to respect what they want, like, as culture, what they want as, as a country, as people, as a majority, what they want. And it's also not, if how do you see a future? Do you think, would that would that be would a future be for Iran be like
Um,
Qatar?
in my own opinion,
So,
Iran is not comparable to many countries in the world. It's not comparable to other fellow Muslim countries. It's not comparable to European countries, and it's also not comparable to Asian countries. It's it's its own thing. So I think being on the bridgeway of the world, like as if Christian told me, like between the bridge between East and West. I think the best thing for Iran is not actually like becoming like such a modern um, country like Qatar or all the Gulf countries, because those are also a temporary boost in their economy, which is a result of the oil production. But in my opinion, something which would benefit all of us would be something sustainable, something which is not based on the oil production. For example, you look at Oman, yeah, you look at Oman, and they're not really keen on modernizing the country and for Westerners to move in. Instead, they focus on the tourist industry, and they keep their identity and culture, and then they expect tourists to enjoy that culture and to appreciate that culture. So, in my opinion, if there was about to be a relation between the West, it should be based on either cultural and tourist um, industry, tourism industry. Also, in terms of logistics, between you get like China and the West trade corridor, which they have lots of things shipments, you know, and to be honest, with the global warming and with all these problems that we're having right now, I don't think the future transportation is going to be this ideal as it is to this day. So I think it might be a good, it might be even a better solution for Iran to be like a transport hub, like on a land transport, not like a air bridge, like how the Emirates or how like Emirates airline is basically an air bridge between the world. But that could have such a good thing if they build a corridor between like China and India to the west, because it also has ports in the south where the Indians can ship their cargoes through, you know. So in my opinion, it's either the tourism industry and either the and as well as the logistics industry, which could boost Iran's economy. Nevertheless, Iran also has a potential for agriculture as well. Although we have a slight shortage of water, but our land is still fertile enough for agriculture purposes. Perhaps they can consider more suitable way of more suitable products with lower water demand, perhaps.
Right. I mean, I think it's really interesting what you said about, not necessarily having to emulate other countries. Like, I like the idea that Iran
Yeah.
could find its own pathway of its own identity. And the thing you brought up with Oman makes a lot of sense because I've always wanted to travel to Oman. I don't really want to travel to Saudi Arabia or Qatar or Kuwait because Oman is unique and it really preserves its heritage
Yes.
and its uniqueness. So I really would like to visit Oman, but I don't really care to
Yeah.
visit these very modern, Gulf countries. And Iran, of
Yeah.
course, I would love to go to Iran. I mean, one of the
You
most
should go to
historic nations on earth.
Qatar.
It's just,
You
I don't
should
feel
go to
so
Well,
Dubai.
comfortable in the
Come
West.
on, Chris. You would love all those countries. Don't have this.
I
I mean,
mean, I think it would be nice to visit, right? But
well,
like, it's not
you
high on
know,
my list.
here's the thing.
Like, I would rather
okay.
go to
Um,
Oman first.
So, but
I'm not a leftist person. I'm also not a right wing person. But I definitely see Qatar and Dubai like they're just like a capitalist heaven. So so yeah. I mean,
no, I feel like what I feel about Dubai, particularly or Saudi, is that they are promoting. I want people to see the culture. I want people to visit. I think fundamentally it all leads to tourism. I think it's all attracting people. It's all attracting investments. It's all attracting people to come and live side by side. That's part of the culture, right? So, but my question is like, Aman, like, how do you see, like, would you, like, how would you see, what is this, like, right now, some of the Iranians I meet, they say they're living, most of them,
yeah.
they're living in an oppressed, IRGC rule, right? So, should they be more lenient? Should they loosen a little bit of their laws and then be moderate, or at least step into that world so that other countries will also start engaging with them,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
not
obviously.
shouting death to America, for example, right? So
Of
like,
course.
so those things have to change because those extremist ideology, especially with people who are living over there, like I wouldn't be happy to
Yeah.
visit a country that hates this country, right? Like, so where do you see well, I get your part of Iran being its own. I like it. It's just they're having their own identity. But what is that own identity? How would you? That's the question. Because okay, they all expected during the 12 days of war that there will be a
Well,
big
the thing is
revolution
that
and there'll
if
be a,
there's about to
there will
be
be an
an
Athlon.
ideal
Nothing
revolution,
happened.
it should be amongst the people and from its own. It shouldn't be imposed from another country, you know.
Yes, 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 yes. That's correct. So how would, so you don't? This is my argument I always have. is that you don't want to get into two extremes, right? Right now we are in one extreme, and let's say if something happens and they become to another extreme. See, that's the fear I have. Like, do you see a moderate continuation like of Iran, like where people Iran has its own identity. People can follow their religion. They are not oppressed, and people
Yeah.
also don't have to follow their
So
religion. Like
let me
they
get
can
this
also
straight.
freely move.
The Islamic Republic is indeed it is an extremist government and regime. However, it's not an Islamist extremism. It's just an anti-Western extremist because still lots of Muslims of other nations call the Islam they demise the Islamic Republic and they say that these are not real Muslims and the real Muslims in fact should be way more religious and way more radical. So yeah, this extremism that they have is just a pure anti-Western stereotype. And I'd say, imagine, imagine the Islamic extremism, something like the KKK in the West. Saddam Hussein would be the Hitler, and the Islamic Republic would be the Soviet Union of the Muslim world. So it's not like saying it's not saying like which there could be different flavors of extremism. There could be different types of it. So for example, in the country of Iran, you might
Right.
think like homosexuals are oppressed heavily, which is true, but transgenders have a right to they have a right to have their surgeries and procedures to change their. Yeah, in Iran, they
In
have the
Iran?
right to have the surgery.
Wow.
Also, I mean, women enjoy a fairly high social
Yes,
status
indeed.
and,
For
and
example,
rights too in Iran too.
it was just a week ago there was a bill that allowed women to have because for example when women are in an accident if they're injured or if they're killed in an accident compared to men they get less compensation from the insurance companies, but there has been a bill in the parliament that it's trying to balance that equality. For example, women had the right to vote in Iran earlier than Switzerland. That's a very cool fact, to be honest, because I think yeah, Switzerland had it in
It is cool, yeah.
1967, whilst Iran had the right for women to vote in 1963, 4 years before Switzerland. And so yeah, there's this interesting facts about it, but I'd say the same way that the Soviet Union collapsed and the same way that the Soviet Union dissolved because of their failures of their own policies, that it was their whole identity of the regime. I think the same is going to happen to the Islamic Republic because after a while they gotta change, they gotta develop because they can't exist like this. They don't have the support of any other country. Their closest allies are Russia and China, which are basically one of the least reliable nations in the world, least reliable regimes in the world. And then when you don't have the support of your own people, you can't survive. You're gonna basically collapse by your own, because that's the same thing that happened in Soviet Union. They realized that communism and those extreme approaches to its economy is not going to work anymore because people were queuing for basic necessities of their lives. Now, in my opinion, we have another problem in Iran, and talking about democracy, talking about liberalism, talking about religion, talking about human rights. In Iran, and not just in Iran, in most of the places other than the democratic West, there is not a meaning of self, and there's not a clear meaning of self and human rights. Basically, in the West, you treat it as one person with rights. You treat it as self, and then it's first self and then the society. But in our country, it's first the society and then the self. You know, so by this approach, it means that you gotta adopt to the society. Not the society. The society should not adopt with you. You should adopt with the society.
That's one of the things we've talked about on this podcast a few times, actually, is some of these differences between
Exactly.
Western and more Eastern-based cultures, in that Western's more individualistic. Eastern cultures tends to be a bit
Yeah.
more about society and
And you can't say which one is wrong,
respect
which
and
one is
these
right.
kinds
You
of
know,
things.
you can't say. Yeah, a little bit of both. Exactly.
A little bit of
As
both,
you,
you know?
But the problem I see is that you can't also. That's why we me and Chris always talks about that you can't connect the
yeah,
state and the church. So you can't. So that's why you got to draw the line. Like so again, well, that's really hard for a Muslim nation, right? You got the Sharia law, the Sharia way of ruling. So that's where people are also struggling, and that's where I there has to be a right pathway, and that's where I really like how the Saudis and the Qataris they move, because they have this modern take, because they also have Sharia law, but they don't it's not enforced,
it's
or
in,
like, how do I
it's
say,
for yeah, it's
it's
forced,
more
but it's
lenient.
forced with an open mind.
So yes, I think
Yeah.
Iran should take that step as well, because the problem is that the lot of the ruling that they
Well,
have is
actually,
part of Sharia law, right? So
a
they
lot of
have to
people
also have
mistake the law system in Iran with Sharia law, but it's not Sharia. It's fiqh. Fiqh is the Shia version of Sharia,
fiqh.
because Sharia is for Sunnis and fiqh is for Shias, and yeah, so it's not Sharia law actually. But the difference between fiqh and Sharia is that Sharia is always constant, and sometimes it can change, but fiqh is constantly updating with the fatwas of the mullahs.
Maybe that's
Interesting.
what there's a mistake. That's an interesting point you're
I've
making.
never heard
Maybe
that.
they should adapt to Sharia law, because that's consistent, doesn't change. Again, you can just change when really want. Do you think that maybe fiqh is updating every time? Maybe at that time, whoever is giving the fatwa are not the people. I mean, you don't even
Yeah.
know who's going to give the fatwa, right? So maybe you end up having people that doesn't like something, then it becomes a fatwa, and then it
Yeah.
becomes a law, right? So I think that could also the fear factor, but I think it's more interesting to learn, because myself being a Sunni, like growing up in Sri Lanka, there's so much of integral part of a lot of things, and I always consider that stupidity of
Yeah.
Islam
Yeah.
is having
Exactly.
divisions, and it's the same thing with
Well.
Catholicism, and it's the same with any religion. If you
Yeah.
take Judaism, if you take the Torah, like it's the same thing. There's so much division. If you look at, okay, so now even in political parties, there is left,
Exactly.
that's
Yeah.
far
But in the
left, there is
leftist
center
movements of
left, and
Iran,
there is
like in the
right,
leftist movements of
extreme
Iran, there
right.
was dozens of factions. There were Islamic leftists, like the People's Mujahideen of Iran. There were like Muslim and communists at the same time. There were the Maoists looking to like the Chinese communists, and there was lots of factions, and it was these factions that ruin everything and create tensions. You know.
That's the problem. I mean, if you believe in
Exactly. Yeah.
God, there's also the devil, right? The devil has to play the role. So then the devil has to play the role. The other day, today, I had a very fun conversation with my friend, and he was arguing with me, Chris, that he was like, okay, so I would like to only have God.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
God.
no, it's not going to work that way. He's like, what if
Well,
everyone is
religion is a
happy? I'm
package.
like,
You
no,
know,
no, no,
religion
no,
is
no.
like a
You're
package. You can't
forgetting
just
the
pick one
fact.
thing. You gotta accept the whole thing.
Yeah, there
Yeah,
could be devil.
exactly.
Devil is part of the deal. It's part of the deal, right? And there, it's funny thing here. We say devil is in the details. It's the same thing, Devil plays around, and then only you will have. Then only it will make you exciting. But going back to Iran, like Arman said, I feel like it has to be something more open, and maybe they have to lower the temperature of the fiqh law, and then also, like control, not control per se, open up things, and let Western countries visit, like, for example. And if you look at a perfect example right now is Syria. Look, the leader of Al Qaeda, that
Had a
the
bounty on
United
his head.
States government said had a bounty on his head, is the president of Syria, and he had an interview sitting down with the former CIA director that was going to hunt him down. September of 2022, this year, September 26th, during the UNGA, Chris, you have to see this picture. He sat down
Yeah,
with the
crazy
former
turn of
CIA
events.
director, David, that was hunting him down. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? What a flip flop, right?
Weird world.
So it's a weird world we're living in. And I'm like, holy smokes. It's just, I don't know what to say. I'm not a fan of it. Like, what do you mean? So one day you can say this guy is a very bad guy and have a bounty on him, and the next day he's the
It's
great
just politics.
guy. Well, it's not. It's beyond politics. Come on. It's not like it's just. It's openly seeable politics, and also I think this is a fundamental mistake that will also lead to, which that will also look America so, what do you call, um, losing, like America can switch things back and forth, which, like, it also, I want America to be the superpower always, so it look kind of makes it a little harder for America to be, the leader of the free world. I mean, it also, I mean, on the other hand, you can also argue that things evolve and things could change tomorrow. I wouldn't be surprised if Khomeini comes and address the UN General Assembly. You know what I'm talking about, Arman, right? So, like, if Khomeini comes and says, okay, let's take the deal, and meets President Trump,
It's,
and I think
I'm not
that's the
surprised
only
because
hope I have.
they also have this habit of like we always say, like one day Khamenei is gonna say that because when there was a war between Iran and Iraq, during the end of it, there was this pushing of this peace towards Iran, and Iran didn't like the peace. He said, "No, they invaded us first. We got to take some land from them." But anyway, in the end, Khomeini said, I'm gonna drink the glass of poison." It means that I'm gonna make a deal with the enemy. So we have this. We say Khomeini is gonna drink the glass of poison one day as well. They're gonna make a deal.
Well, I think if the original Khomeini, right, the guy who started it, if he
Well,
was
the
alive,
thing is
maybe
that
things would have been
Khomeini
changed.
was
You
not
never
as
know.
corrupt as the current leader. So Khomeini had a basic lifestyle. He um, he had some extra. I mean, he was the founder of the Islamic Republic, but in the end of the day, he wasn't as bad as Khomeini. And
So how does the
no, he's not
Khomeini right
his
now?
son.
Is he his son?
Khomeini was military commander during the war between Iran and Iraq, and then later he was the president.
So
Yeah, that was the first guy, and now the
Khomeini. That
second
was the
guy is
first
Ali
guy, right?
Khamenei. Yeah, he was in.
Ali Khomeini.
That is
Okay.
fun. So
There,
there's
no,
going to be
there's
So
no family
there is no
connection. There's no
connection.
bloodline connection.
Okay, okay. So there could be another Khomeini that could come
Well,
and change the whole thing differently.
we had some prosperous, we had some prosperous mullahs as well, like the same religious scholars. There was Khatami, there was Beheshti, and during the revolution itself, a lot of these religious scholars actually they were secular, and then they believed in democracy, and then they believed in the separation of the state and the religion. People like Beheshti, people like Montazeri, people like what you call it, people like Talabani, and these were all either silenced or they were pushed. They were either basically they were either eliminated or they were silenced or went sent to an exile. For example, I have the same friend that I mentioned to Christian when I came from Germany, like when he was a political prison in the 80s. He said that in the prisons the same Islamists that they participate along the leftists in the revolution, they heavily oppressed the leftist movements after the revolution. In I think in 1986 they executed 8,000 prisoners in a year. Well, of these prisoners were mostly leftists from the People's Mujahideen of Iran, as well as the other guerrilla fighters of the leftists. They participate in the revolution side by side by the Islamists, but the Islamists just took over power and messed up things. And he said that he was also being tried for execution, but at that time Montazeri, which was like a very more progressive Islamist, took power of the justice system, and he said like, "What have you guys done to these prisoners? We're just a newly established republic. We shouldn't be like silencing our opposition." Like,
That's where they Khomeini took him
Montazeri, yeah,
over. Like he got
he had the
killed,
beef
right?
with later on with
Even
Khomeini.
the
He was okay with
yes,
Khomeini.
but wasn't the initial plan was to be an interim government? That's what was it? Was that his
Yeah,
plan, right?
it was supposed to be
Initially, it
just a
wasn't like to take over,
temporary prime
become.
leader.
He
It
was
wasn't supposed to last for long.
yes, because when I read when I reading stuff from Hussein, the guy who was with him, and it was all part of the deal, and that
Yeah,
then they were there when they tried to take him down. The
yeah.
whatever the person's name you're talking. I
So
think I feel like honestly I feel like the only way of change
I
would
think
be
not
another
necessarily.
Khomeini.
Yeah,
That means whoever comes in gets coordinated
yeah,
has to have this open idea, and that would be the beginning of something long.
that sounds a little bit like the case of China, right? You had the premier, but like I forgot his name, the one who started opening China up.
It's
He was
Mao,
still a part of the no. So after it was Deng something, I think.
because you have to, because I don't want to have another big revolution and a lot of people die and it'll end up going into the
yeah.
next extreme level, so you can't have that, and then it'll
No, it's not. It's
flip
not
flop,
even
and it's
healthy
not
for the
healthy for the
world.
country too. It has to have. Yes, and on the other side we got Israel.
No,
You know,
the
they always
problem
wanted
is
to
that
change. I don't know
the whole
what
Middle
change they're
East got
looking in.
screwed up since Iran had its revolution, because Iran became like the acting power of the powers of the region. So it became the regional power, and sadly, I mean, I'm sorry for all the Middle Easterns, but sadly, my governments have not been acting well in this case in the region's politics. So what they need is the change of politics necessarily, both global and domestic. So the best option is
Right.
for now the change within the regime itself, because otherwise it's gonna be
I
so
think
tricky. And I wanted to say
I,
this
from
as
I
well,
I
but
ISFGs,
also
right?
I think I forgot halfway through my one of my sentences. Um, I was talking about human rights, yeah, or I was talking about like how how the difference between the West and East is, how the societies differ. One thing we lack is the tolerance for each other's opinion. You know what? It doesn't matter who Iranian you meet and what is their political beliefs. Either they're atheist, either they're secular, either they're religious, either they're communist. They all think that they're the correct person. They don't have that much understanding that you can call them democratic people. You need a democratic society first to have a democratic government.
So a lot of what you're saying, Armand, actually reminds me a bit
Unfortunately,
of
it's
what's happening
happening
in
in
the
the
United
West as well.
States. We're losing a lot of our own. Yeah, we're losing a lot of our own tolerance, and I think in Western society for different opinions as well. So while it's something we
Yeah,
traditionally champion, I think it's something we're losing
it's
a bit
sad.
too. Um, in fact, I draw a lot of parallels between a lot of what you said in the last 5 or 10 minutes, and also what some of the things that are happening. Like also like I think we as the United States also owe the Middle East and the world an apology for our own domestic
Yeah.
and international politics as well,
But yeah,
unfortunately.
That's the sad part, because that's where you see that we were heavily involved in a lot of things, and like I said, I feel like before Raza Shah, after Raza Shah, like during his period of time, it was very
yeah,
there was no it was a peaceful Iran, a peaceful Middle East. So they wanted, that's why I call the big five, the big military industrial complex. They want war, they want chaos. So the only thing that they could make chaos was that to have a very unstable Middle East, and easy way was to get involved with Iran and have this what do you call revolution happen, fund it, and change the government. And it's always easy
yeah.
to control some people with religion, and then it sparked everything. And then we invaded Iraq for no reason, put Saddam on prison for no reason,
Nothing.
weapons of mass destruction, nothing was there. Innocent millions of American soldiers died for nothing. We spent 8 trillion dollars on a war that we never won. So like I think it's changing. And also I believe, Aman, the strongest and the closest point of where Iran is right now, with having President Trump as the president, this is the closest you can get for a change that America will accept. Look what's happening in Syria. After everything that has happened, after even having a bounty on the guy who's the president now,
Well,
things change because of President Trump. That open attitude. Imagine you. Hopefully, there is a leader that's follow. This is why I like about Trump's foreign policy. Amazing. No war started. Didn't want to go. Imagine if it was Obama. Imagine if it was a different president.
Well,
We would
he
now
did conduct acts
I
of
mean,
war against Iran. I don't think we should pretend that he didn't do that.
no,
But
but see, but the thing is that we didn't have boots on ground, so like we didn't invade basically. So we kind of, it was like a gray area he went through, and also didn't have people like in what we did in Afghanistan, or
yeah,
he
but he
didn't
had
escalate the things, right?
no legal
What?
rights in international or domestic law to do
I
so.
mean,
What?
he didn't respect that. What
I
Christian
didn't
is
get you,
saying
Chris.
that
What were you
the
saying?
United States didn't
Oh, sure.
respected the international airspace and the international sovereignty of Iran, basically.
Well, nobody's. I mean, do you ever think any country is respecting each other's sovereignty? Look what Russia is doing. Look what Israel did for
Yeah, but
Qatar.
like
So we can go back and forth,
in
right?
that
So
case, you're
there is a lot
comparing
of
President Trump with Putin and Israel, which puts them all next to each other. You know, makes them identical.
yeah, but at the same time, in my theory is that we need to
Of
have
course, money. Yeah,
a peaceful region. That's the end goal, right? End goal. So you can ignore the small stuff that's happening. The main goal is to have a peaceful Iran. The main goal is to have a peaceful Israel. The main goal is to have a peaceful Palestinian state living by each other. So this is only, as much as America has flaws, this is the only period of time. Remember that you could have a stable and peaceful Middle East, because President Trump is someone who could who could be able to drive everyone together and not adhere
yeah.
to the military industrial complex. Because I remember, like when he went on this big tour with the Middle East, the whole goal was him trying to explain for this big five companies that control this country, especially the economy. They were like, listen, we don't need to create
But
wars.
you
Let
got
me
to
go
realize
sell the
something.
weapons
What
and make
United
money.
States is
They were
doing is
happy.
not stopping wars. It's not creating peace. It's just pausing wars. You see, there's lots of paused wars worldwide. Either if it's Azerbaijan and Armenia, either if it's like North Korea and South Korea, either if it's China and Taiwan, Russia and Ukraine. These wars, or if it's Pakistan or India, these wars have been paused. And it was also the same case with Israel and Palestine up until like 3 years ago, up until October 7. And
Right.
my opinion is not is actually critical on this because um, all wars are fought for a peace, you know. So there's no war ending for eternity. There's always a peace in by the end of it. What what is not ethically correct is intervening in wars, either by making fake pieces, is the same as selling them weapons, and then you just pause the wars for later when you low on money, then you go start the war again, and then you start selling them weapon. And this is not ethically wrong. This is not ethically right. It's basically wrong on by every means. Because so anyway, in my opinion, Middle East is probably more peaceful, is way more peaceful than what it was like 10 years ago. It's way more peaceful for Iran than what it was like 80 years, when it was in the 80s. So the main problem of Middle East is not really peace. Is not really lacking peace. It's lacking politics and it's lacking strategies. You know, Iran doesn't have long-term strategies. It only has tactical It only has tactical plans for the near future. It doesn't have any long-term plans for how to develop the country, and that's why the reason. That's part of the reason why they're failing. And you also get Israel, which I want to ask them this honest question: how much longer do you want to keep fighting the Palestinians? Like like far right politics of Israel, they think that they can eliminate Palestinians. No, it's not going to be possible. You can't erase a nation's identity. Like there's been lots of like Polish people. They have been under the invasion of both the Germans and Russians for hundreds of years, but they haven't lost their identity. It's the same with Palestinians. You can't erase their identity. So I think the better solution is to understand like how long are gonna people how longer are they gonna tolerate are they gonna keep on fighting with each other. And for the only thing needed in Iran, the most, it's not the only thing, but it's the most important thing, that if it happens, it will flatten the way for the other reforms. The only thing required is the change of the international politics, the global politics. They need to they need to be clear about their nuclear deal. They need to be clear about their stance on Palestine and Israel. The Palestine and Israel issue needs to be solved. It can't be staying for longer. It has been about 100 years now, and in my opinion, it boils down to the Iranians to the Iranians as well, because at the moment, like I said, Iranians don't want to respect each other's opinion. They think every person thinks they're the right and everyone else is wrong. So when the people's mentality is authoritative, this Islamic Republic is what they deserve. You know?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that goes back to what I was saying about how similar that is to the United States. Like, we're getting what we
Yeah.
deserve now because, I mean, we're so divided. Um, but also, I like what you were saying about the long-term vision. I think that goes back to a lot of what you were saying about your own kind of idea for Iran in the future, kind of like
Yeah.
long-term plans after the oil economy, strategy about where, utilizing its position and stuff. So I think that's really interesting. But while we still have just a little bit of time, I also wanted to ask you, Arman, just from a little bit more about your own experience in the UK.
Yes.
So I
I've
mean,
been
you've
here
been
for
there about
5 years.
5 years, right? Yeah. So in those 5 years, what would you say what has stood out to you the most in terms of your lived experience there, in terms of how it differs, from your lived
So,
experience in Iran?
one one thing I like about here is that the society here is not ruled by rules. It's ruled by ethics, and it's ruled by manners and politeness. And to be honest, it's only United Kingdom which is like this. If you go to Europe, it's not like this. If you go to Germany, it's the law. The first thing is the law. But if you go to if you probably go to like Italy, it's pure chaos probably. But not it's not as they say in the past. But different countries have their own way of living. But in the UK, what I like is that they're not strict like the Germans, but they're more flexible, and um, they have ethics on everything. They test everything to see like, is this thing what we're doing is actually correct, or is this like only based on our perspective? So they're open people, and to be honest, they're one of the most welcoming societies. If you wanna, if you want, if as an immigrant, if you want to integrate, they're one of the most open societies to be able to um, integrate within them, whilst also keeping your own identity. You know, because because in other places like
Interesting. Yeah.
America is also another similar case, but the thing is that when you go to America, if you live for long over there, you're no longer. If you go back to your country, you're no longer treated as a fellow citizen. You're more American than anyone else. So, America has a strong culture, and what I understand is that um, countries that immigration is not a new thing, but it has been getting out of control in the recent years. But overall, it's not a new thing. It has existed for hundreds of years, thousands of years. You know, so I see that countries with strong cultures suffer less from immigration than the countries which have a weaker culture. They tend to suffer more from immigration, and they tend to have a more polarized stance on the immigration. Like the case in Germany, like half of the population votes for AfD, which is like the right wing too far right. I'm not sure I'm gonna call it far right, but I'm just gonna call it like anti-immigrant. And then you also have the ultra leftist, like you have the ultra leftist green movement, which is like, yeah, we should accept everyone, and yeah, all those things. So you have a polarized society, but however, in the UK, it's not like that. It's more unified. It's more towards the center. They say, yeah, we should accept immigrants, but only if they integrate with us, only if they know English enough. And one other good thing about UK is that their language is English, so it has been generally more easier for the immigrants to integrate, because it just happens that more immigrants speak English than other languages. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
Imagine if it was
So it
French, it would
has
be a
been
bit
just as
harder.
life has been way
But
easier than in here than
no,
what I've heard from other Iranians in other parts of the world, like in Europe.
okay, that's an interesting view. I think in terms of a couple of things that I wanted to touch up before we get to the close line is that you said I think the America has to show leadership. America needs to show the leadership of how to keep everything at peace. And I think there has to be, that's what I like about the current presidency. Like you said, a pause of war could later on could be converted into permanent peace. So you don't know. There has to be a starting point where everything becomes to stop, like where you continue from there. So the leadership of America always have mattered in the global stand. And also when when you get into the nitty gritty of, I like the way that you said that within Iranians needs to respect each other's opinion and not get bonkers about it, like, oh, you don't know anything, or go crazy about it. And in terms of the US, the culture, I would say, I think it's the same like you said. The problem, what I see here, is that people come here illegally, which people are against. Plus, they also take advantage of the system, and they also fail to learn English. So that's like a big three problems that have eventually let people drive to say we don't
Yeah,
want any immigrants, like to some extent. But most they also know that, okay, they are also America is also a cultural country, strongly cultured country, so they also need immigrants to be part of the integration. There's so many people saying come in illegally here. A lot of things are changing up here, things are getting fast tracked. I see a lot of students getting green card, pump 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 pump, like quickly. Everything is moving so quick right now that when you're studying, you get 3 months, in 3 weeks, everything is getting sorted, where it's not getting stacked up and getting delayed. So, and in terms of how it's funny thing. You said that UK. I don't want to get into this fight, but I have a strong disagreement of how they are arresting people for social media posts. I don't think it's the same UK. I don't think there's freedom of expression in UK. I don't think that so many people have been oppressed, especially for social media posts. And I think the country has gone far too crazy about it. And then now also it's about now right now they want to create a digital ID, not aligned with it the way it has all come forward. They wanted to monitor the
Yeah, well,
citizens, they want to police the citizen, and obliquely. But for me, the more important thing is that you should be able
yeah,
to freely express what you believe in, whether you like it. And that's what I always tell Chris, that I like about this country is two things: freedom of speech and
yeah,
capitalism. It always works. People think it doesn't work, but it always works. I have seen a failed Europe because of social economic side where they took forward and they moved forward. And then I also see a successful Nordic countries where they have integrated socialism and
yeah,
capitalism to
correct.
the level it has to be and balance it out. They're doing great. So then I think America and countries like UK have to navigate through. And the biggest mistake for the UK, what I
Exactly. Yeah.
believe, was leaving the union without having a plan. They never had exit plan. That's the key thing. You can leave the union. It's fine. It's always anyways collapsing, but have an exit plan where you could also survive on your own. Now, because if you don't know, I know that because I did work with the British government, I mean, for some time, and I know like a lot of laws they have to write it. Like they don't have like policies. It was all part of EU.
Yeah.
So now they have to write their own policies. Like imagine you're like the third, fourth, you're one of the biggest largest economy in the world, and you're trying to write your own policy which haven't
You
even
know,
written in the last 40 years or so. That's where I see. But
you're
Aman,
welcome.
thanks for joining. Like it was great. Like I really liked the narrative of how you put forward, and I also like your openness, where you told there are key things to play and to change. And I feel like that change in Iran and hopefully within a lot of Iranians comes in and says, okay, I respect your opinion. You're wrong, but I respect it. You're right, I respect it. So I don't disagree. Like that's what I always tell people.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hey, it's okay to disagree.
Yeah.
You don't have to fight each other. That's part of living as humans, right, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, anything you want to say, Aman, before we wrap it
Yeah.
up?
Just
Like,
wanted to say that. Yeah. In my opinion, one reason of the Western society going backwards, especially since the turning of the century. So, you know, until 1991 there was Soviet Union, and there was a competition between the East and the West. Yeah, but now after 1991,
Competition, yeah.
when Soviet Union collapsed, there was no longer at least a military or a power competition didn't exist. So that's why capitalism is eating itself. So the problem is
Eating itself. It,
hold
this
on,
goes
hold on,
we
what
hold
you
need the
on.
said, like
devil and
we
God.
need the
Yeah,
devil and
and
God.
and here's the
Well,
problem.
no,
Here's
no,
the
no, no.
problem.
I
The
think I.
new East, which is China, is the peaceful East, which is okay with trade. And this is what has caused the capitalism collapse. It is liberal capitalism which has enabled which has enabled the all the capital and all the investments of the Western countries to go to China. And you see, this has been happening since the 90s. It wasn't the case before that, because before the 1991, the Western countries were keen on developing, and they were keen on economical, industrial, social, and cultural development. But since then, they just gave up. They're not caring anymore. And in that case, like you see, cities like Detroit in the United States, or you see like cities in like Glasgow or Hull, Kingston upon Hull in England, they've been derelict. Like their population has been like probably 10%, 20% of what it was like 1920, and You see this. There's a true fact. They say the backbone of every nation is not their political beliefs, it's not their religion, and it's not their culture, it's their economy. And when you don't have economy, you're nothing. You're just an underdog. So they got to sort this out. They got to realize, and the problem is more even twisted, because the reason that the investment went to China is that the cost was way higher for the industry to survive in the West. It was so higher than what it was in China. So, for example, a labor worker in United Kingdom is not happy to get paid for £5 an hour. So of course the company is gonna take its factory to China, so to reduce costs. So this is the problem of capitalism. It's just for making profits, and it's good. Capitalism is good if it's controlled, but under no competition, it's gonna start eating itself.
Also feel like I hear what you're saying, and it's another debate that we can get into. I feel like capitalism has its plus and weaknesses. I feel like there has not been any competition in the world, like you are correctly pointed it out. And what has we done in the last 20 or 30 years? We haven't invented something new. We haven't invented something awesome that people look up to. Like maybe now, I think that's why I really like the current presidency, because he's trying to revitalize and bring back industrialization, bring back. And this is where I also contradict with the sustainability issues, where it was all put onto a hold. When you look at, you correctly said 1991, the end of
Yeah.
Soviet Union and everything collapsed, right? In 1992, they had the first ever summit, where climate change came into place, everything put into place, and then in the Stockholm Environmental Conference came into play. So the Rio Plus 20, the Rio Conference, everything aligned
Yeah.
with the collapse of the Union, the Soviet Union, and like I said, it all put. I strongly feel this whole UN agenda of sustainability has put a pause, or driven the globe, driven backwards, or at least slowly driving it backwards, human development. Or that will also impact how we as humans became more developed, and industrialization, everything came into a slightly halt, because everyone tried to change it, less carbon emission, yada yada yada. And then now we are in a tipping point, like everything is reversing back again. You can see a lot of countries, they don't even care about sustainability anymore. Western countries particularly, they are going back. And China, look at China, look at, like you correctly pointed it out, they are focusing. China is basically becoming a
Yeah.
capitalistic country, so in one or another
I
way.
think we can
Yeah,
go on
yeah, of
about
course.
this for
I
a
know,
while,
yeah,
but
but it's an interesting topic to discuss. But I feel like every ideology, or every
Yeah.
movement has its plus and weaknesses. But anyways, thanks Aman for joining, and thanks Chris for making this work out. And I'm really excited, because it's gonna be our first podcast that we have a guest,
Um,
and he's an alumni
what a
from our
coincidence.
school.
Yeah.
What a coincidence, right? Yeah, and I was like, Chris said, like, oh, I didn't know until during the
Yeah.
call that you studied at Sussex. But did you like it
Yeah, I
over
liked
there?
it. I liked it.
What's different? Yeah, yeah, I liked it, but it's some kind of, I didn't like the professors. Sometimes I felt like, because I was studying masters, I felt like I knew more than them, because they were not up to date. So I was like, okay,
yeah.
you need to. If
We
you're
were also in
teaching
a different
masters,
field.
Yeah.
Arman's more of in a technical field.
well,
Yeah.
who is
Yeah.
in different field? We both studied the same
No, no,
field.
no, no.
Yeah.
We're in the
I
same
was
field,
in
but Arman is in a
engineering.
different,
Yeah.
more of
Oh, technical yeah, in engineering. So, anyways, guys, thank you so much for joining. I'm going to, and thanks to everyone to listening. And we will put Aman's contact if you want to reach him out. And with that, we'll have another episode of Every Degree Matters, and we will have another guest. Or it'll be me and Chris. Until